Welcome back, everybody. Second hour of Inside the Gamecocks, the show. Firing up now. We've got Alex Jones in from thebigspur.com for our Gamecock Smorgasbord segment. Alex, good to see you, man. Anything worth talking about today on in the beginning of May here?
Oh, maybe a few things. Maybe quite a few things. I got some. I guess maybe the draft ending. Got some 2026 mocks already happening. Lenora Sellers and Jalen Kilgore popping up in a few already. So never slows down.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's we were having that hype train discussion here in the first hour, and it's always you get a little leery about expectations. I think as Gamecock fans, there's part of us that likes being the underdog, right? It's like, yeah, please just keep not assuming we're going to do anything, which has kind of been, the way Beamer has been successful here. But how do you think the Gamecocks fare heading into an off season of hype and expectations?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the next step for the program overall is, handling expectations. Because I think when you think about it, most seasons under Shane Beamer so far, they haven't had a ton of expectations. Maybe 2 years ago, going into Spencer Rattler's last year, it kind of had some talk about potentially being, coming off the wins over Clemson and Tennessee, maybe a few expectations out there. But this year, I mean, as you can imagine, they're probably going to be top 15 preseason teams, somewhere in that range. And so, I mean, it's going to be about handling those early expectations, and you're going to be on, in a national spotlight week one, game one on Sunday being probably the only game on TV at the time, playing against Virginia Tech in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's going to be big.
Showcase.
It's going to be a showcase game. I'm pretty sure it's going to kick off. I kind of feel like 3:30.
Yeah.
They'll do that, and then Notre Dame, Miami will be the second game of a doubleheader. Or maybe it will be at night and they'll run 2 games at night. Because I was thinking about this, and I don't know anything about this subject. But Tennessee and Syracuse played the night before. Do they have to do anything to get the stadium ready for the next game? I mean, maybe will they need more time for that? It seems like a quick turnaround to do it that next afternoon. I don't know. I'm probably talking out of my cornhole there.
Yeah, you see some of the videos sometimes of these professional stadiums have to turn around one day. Like, they do it pretty quickly overnight, but maybe that is the case that they will need a little bit of time. But, if I had to guess today that it'd be 3:30 just because they're going to want eyes on both games and not have 2 games running at the same time. But I think really with TV, nothing would surprise you at all.
Oh, no, they don't. They don't care what we think. They don't care what anybody thinks.
Fans. No, that's right. Yeah.
You're going to play a game on Jupiter. Kick off at 1.
That's right. It's like looking at Lamont Paris' squad this year and be like, well, we're going to open up with a tournament in Ulaanbaatar for Mongolian Mike. That way we can welcome him into the season, right?
Awesome.
It'll be airing at 3 a.m. live. You can catch the replay at noon.
I'd send Alex to Ulaanbaatar to cover that. Probably.
That'd be something.
You have to get a Sherpa or something to take you to the arena. I don't know. Anyway, Ulaanbaatar is a metropolis, JC. You're just being hateful.
That's right. Anyway. Stop with your Mongolian hate.
Stop Mongolian hate now.
There's a platform to run on.
Talk about like the Nebraska of countries.
You gotta give it to the Mongolians, man. They have been around.
Wasn't Kublai Khan Mongolian?
I mean, yeah. Listen,
they used to be something. Now they're
they've outlasted Rome. They've outlasted any number of empires.
Yeah, but it's like Nebraska football. They're just happy to get to the bowl game now.
And now, that's right. Thanks for noticing me. This is the Eeyore of Asian countries.
They're kind of gee, Russia and China. I don't know. I'm gonna go sleep next to my poster of Kublai Khan again. Hey, Mongolian girls are good though. They're popular here in the States. Who Hot? You ever been to a Who Hot?
Who Hot? Oh, yeah. I thought you said girls.
Oh, no.
I'm like,
if I'd have said girls and Hoo Ha, that means something totally different, dog. Tuna, no, Mongolian grill. Who hot? Yeah, even a Mongolian grill.
Yes. I just misheard it.
Anyway,
And I thought we were heading off on a completely different direction.
Ben makes a funny in the chat box.
Yeah.
He says that the South Carolina game in Mongolia comes on the CW right after that Azerbaijani movie that ranked number 1.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeez. So Alex, I guess we'll start a little bit about your piece about the NFL coaching feedback from the Gamecocks, and you had a lot of quotes there. It's up on thebigspur.com for those that want to read it. I believe it's a free article, not a members only article.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of tell us about putting that together and kind of what you learned and kind of what the general feedback was, that you kind of collected from the good folks that run the National Football League.
Yeah, kind of listen to all those guys talk. I think you could tell or get a sense of the respect that all of these guys really had for South Carolina's defense throughout the season. You heard that on TV on the broadcast throughout the weekend was really guys talking about, especially that round 2 when he had Demetrius Knight, Kyle, Nick Emenwari, and those guys coming off the board. Like, I think a lot of people just had to respect to the defense. But hearing some of those guys over in Seattle talk about taking Nick Emenwari in the draft, I think Seattle traded up to get that pick, and I think they were a little bit worried that he was going to come off the board before they got to him, and they really liked him. McDonald over there really likes him and kind of sees. I think they don't want to compare him to Cam Chancellor, but see some similarities in there with him as well. And listen to them talk. The Chargers talk about Kyle Kennard. You can really see that they're excited about him and they're happy to get him as well. And I think one of the more impactful interviews and really one of the more interesting ones was listening to the Seattle Bengals talk about landing Demetrius Knight, and because I think there was another one that they were hoping to get him in that spot, and they did, and maybe took Demetrius Knight a little bit earlier than a lot of the teams did, but I think his maturity and just his play on the field really stood out. And they were asked during the press conference, like, is being 25, is that something that maybe kind of worried y'all a little bit? And they both said no, they had no worries with that. And Zach Taylor, the head coach, said, I love everything about that guy and think he's going to be playing football for a long time. So I think you can just hear that these guys really respected what South Carolina was able to do team-wise, but really defensively. You could tell just the amount of respect the NFL teams had for him.
Yeah, it's some players on that defense last year, and you have to replace those. It's the most defensive guys I saw something. One of the players from back in the Holtz era said that it was a tie for the most defensive players drafted. I'd have to go check that. But anyway, it's number 1, even if it's co-number 1.
Mm-hmm.
So now you got to replace them. Kyle Kennard has to be replaced. Demetrius Knight has to be replaced. Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, Nick Emenwari. Some of those guys you're not going to be able to replace because you don't, until Jazavian Currents gets here or Kendall Daniels ends up coming into his own, you don't have anybody like Nick Emenwari at safety. You hope you do. But we'll start with that. Peyton Williams. By the way, I released my projected depth chart on the Big Spur right before. Ooh, did you read it?
I have seen it, yeah.
All right, there you go. Hey, you're a good man. I say that tongue in cheek. I don't think anybody should care about my projected depth chart. But anyway, people obviously do. But I had Peyton Williams up there. He won an award for most improved at safety. A lot of folks have seen him come in, and he's always kind of handled the moment well. I did think they missed Nick in the bowl game against Illinois because Illinois is kind of a smash mouth team. That does concern me a little bit, but your take on Peyton, and if he ends up, if the projection is correct, and be sure you mention that if Shane brings this up in a press conference that I wasn't the guilty party. It's just an opinion piece. I can't believe that. I still can't get over that. If he ends up being the guy, Alex, what are your thoughts there? To me, I think that's a logical choice, but I do think he's got to take a step forward. But what do you think?
Yeah, if with Peyton Williams being the most improved, I think that's something that you really wanted to hear coming out of spring practice, just because the talk was around, do you put Jalen Kilgore back there at that safety spot and see who can fit in there at nickel? But from listening to those guys talk throughout spring practice, they really didn't want to move Jalen Kilgore from nickel just because of how well he played there. And I think if you can have Peyton Williams come in and take that next step, and I think we talked about it on here before, but every time Peyton Williams is in the game, he makes plays. You think back to that Tennessee game coming in, he made plays. Vanderbilt this year, I remember a fourth down stop. He comes in and kind of runs in and breaks up a pass on fourth down. He just seems like he makes plays every time. And I think now you just want to see him continue to be more consistent. But if he's a guy that can take over that safety spot and play it well enough, it doesn't have to be to a Nick and Memory level, just because I think of how deep the secondary is going to be at each spot. But if he can come in and be solid alongside DQ Smith, that's a huge win for South Carolina, because then you feel really good about keeping Jalen Kilgore at nickel, who, as we were talking about earlier, a lot of NFL draft people think he's got potential as a first round pick, and he kind of showed why last year with the way he played at that spot.
Yeah, staying in the secondary. O'Donnell Fortune did not get drafted, surprisingly enough. I thought he would go with his length and that, but he signed with the Giants, so that's the corner they have to replace. But man, my issue with breaking down the corners isn't necessarily like, wondering, having question marks. It's more of how are you going to keep all these guys happy and keep them on the field at the same time? Because there are a lot of different combinations you could use. I switched it up. I'm a big Vakari Swain fan, but Brandon Cissay's come in, had a great spring. Swain was out. I mean, I know they're going to battle it out. However, I think Cissay is probably going to start at one and Collier at the other, with, then Swain and Norwood behind them and Jalua Solomon behind them. And DeMarcus Leach, true freshman, behind them. That's pretty deep. How do you think this is going to play out? Do you think that, Cissay, maybe because it's weird, because, I'm like, well, on passing downs, they can bring Cissay in and play him at nickel. But do you take a guy that had 5 interceptions last year off the field on passing downs in Kilgore?
Maybe you move him back to safety. Yeah.
Maybe you slide him back. Yeah. Go ahead. Tell me your thoughts on you play Torian Gray and Clayton White, and tell us how you'd handle it.
It's almost like they've gotten to the point in the secondary where there's not enough spots for the guys that they have. Like, at that corner spot, obviously, I think we can feel pretty good about Judge Collier having that number one corner spot, or at least one of them. But with Swain missing spring practice, I think you wonder how that plays into it, to see having that whole spring practice not under him. And I've said it on here before, he may end up just being too good to keep off the field as a non-starter. But I mean, Vakari Swain showed what he could do last year. But if I had to project today, I'd probably pencil in Cissay at that corner spot, but don't count out Cissay or Vakari Swain, because I really liked what I saw from him and thought he took a big step last year. But I think the key for him would be to come back in whenever he's fully cleared or whatever in the summer and getting ready back up to speed. But Miles Norwood too, don't count that guy out. I mean, he's a guy who was pretty solid at Ball State, and if that's your guy, if Miles Norwood ends up being your backup, that's pretty solid depth right there to go along with whoever else, Vakari Swain or Cissay, whoever's the backup. But they've got a lot of different options at each of these spots. And in that safety spot, David Busey as well. Keep an eye on him. He's a guy who could take another step forward. Gerald Kilgore is also back there working. And Jalua Solomon, I think, you can see him kind of working at a few different spots maybe in that secondary, because he's electric. I mean, you saw what he could do in high school on both sides of the ball. He was a big-time playmaker. And I think last year just having that redshirt year is going to help him. But, I mean, I'm interested to see what he can do. And maybe, obviously, he'll probably help on special teams. But the secondary just at each of those spots has so many different options to turn to. And whichever one they turn to, I don't think you'd feel there would be any worry about that spot.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Miles Norwood, I thought he looked good in the spring game. He was kind of the only, I mentioned like the top players of the spring game, because you just didn't see much, man. But Norwood back there did catch my eye, So it's interesting. Vakari, to me, when he comes back, I would work with, if this is just me talking. This is not based, and nobody's told me this. I know they're working Jelon Kilgore back at punt return, and I would work Vakari Swain back there because of what he looked like with the ball in his hands in high school. I just think he's the third corner or the nickel corner or whatever you want to do. Maybe they go to a dime package and everybody's all the corners on the field. But I would punt return sounds like something maybe he could do.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. So, yeah, that's the secondary. Well, linebacker, Demetrius Knight Jr. You mentioned, like, I have this little theory. I think the linebackers actually, as a whole, are going to be better next year, just young. I did switch it up. Sean Murphy now instead of Justin Okoronkwo. It's more about what Sean did in spring than what Justin did not do. Justin's still very young, and Justin, obviously, by the time we get to Virginia Tech, could be the starter. I see them rotating 3, kind of like they did last year with Martin Scott, Knight, and Debo, with a little Fred Johnson mixed in. What say you about the linebacking core?
The one thing they won't have from that linebacker core last year is just the experience that those 3 brought. Obviously, Fred Johnson had his moments this year, but they're not going to have the experience. But from just a playing standpoint, on the field production standpoint, that there may not be as much of a drop off as we once thought. Watching last season, thinking about what could happen in 2025, but I think it's going to be interesting. I think Fred Johnson, he has a great chance to start, and really, I think you can't go wrong with either Justin Okoronkwo or Sean Murphy. But to your point, I think Sean Murphy continued to get better in spring practice, continued to get more acclimated to Clayton White's system. I think overall, both of those guys really had a strong spring, but not to jump too far ahead, but South Carolina moves to that 3-3-5. I think watch Jerron Willis to come in there, and because he's had plays in that where he's done, or 2 years ago when he came in against Texas A&M, that guy came in and he made plays when he moved into that 3-3-5, and I could see him being that press rusher kind of guy coming off the edge in that 3-3-5. And I think last year you didn't see as much of that formation just because they didn't want to take any defensive tackles off the field. Like, I don't think you wanted to bring off a Tonka Hemingway or a TJ Sanders, and they felt good about the linebackers they had in there with the 2 linebacker sets. But I wonder if 3-3-5 is something that you see a little bit more of this year just because of the depth they have that linebacker. And don't count out those freshman linebackers either. Donovan Darden's a really good playmaker, Josh Smith and those guys.
I could see it. I mean, 3-3-5 technically, but very exotic. I'm with you. I think I mentioned this, Jerron. I think Jerron Willis basically is Bam Martin Scott. Maybe a little, probably not as good in space, but maybe even a better pass rusher. And Bam Martin Scott was a great pass rusher linebacker. So I definitely like in my depth chart, I broke it down. Devontae Miles, Maurice Brown on offense. Because when you're doing a depth chart, you're going to leave people out, and people automatically, well, this guy must suck. And it's not true. Because you like at tight end, you've got, like, okay, Brady Hunt in my mind is a starter, but so is either Jordan Dingle or Michael Smith. They're not always going to start 2 tight ends. Heck, last year, Michael Smith was the starting tight end. Josh Simon led it, that kind of thing in the first game. And like Maurice Brown, I think when they go to that thing with the lead blocker that they used in the bowl that was new, that guy, because of his speed and explosiveness, I mean, he's a 4.45 guy. There's a lot you can do with a guy like that at an H-back type spot, right? And so, at linebacker, I'm with you. And I think that Jerron will be, when they go to the 3-man front, he's obviously a guy that you want out there in a 3-3-5, 3-man alignment. I think Devontae Miles, same way, because he's a little light. He's gaining weight, but he's a little light, little lean, right? And I think that as an end in a 3-man, what you're looking for is an end in a 3-man alignment in college is basically Tonka Hemingway, an athletic guy. Doesn't have to be the biggest guy, athletic, because they're ends, but they're tackles. I may walk out the stadium if they put Dylan Stewart in there with his hand down inside on a 3-man front. So that's my other question. I mean, what do you do with Dylan in that situation? If you got Jerron over here, I mean, do you maybe kind of run is it like a bear front almost, where you got a bunch of guys up around the line of scrimmage? I don't know. It's fascinating to me. Clayton White may not have as much experience over there, but he's got a lot of versatile parts. So I think Miles, my point is Miles and Willis, and on offense, Maurice Brown, I think all these guys are kind of like, there always should be a spot like utility player because in these scenarios, these guys are starters. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think so. And Maurice Brown's kind of interesting. The guy, he seems like he's on special teams. He makes plays, and physically, he's one of the more impressive guys on the team from the work he's put in since he arrived. The guy was a walk on coming into the program, and now he's continuing to work his way up. But a guy that maybe not forgetting that tight end room. I think, I like that tight end room overall. Michael Smith. You would have liked to have Michael Smith in there just for it to build on what he was able to do. But I don't think you're worried too much about him from what he was able to do last year. He already knows the system and all that. But to your point, back to kind of the defensive side of the ball, like there's a lot of different. The defense is going to be really versatile this year, and they were last year for the most part. But I think it can be even more versatile this year, just because of the different pieces, like a Jerron Willis, like a Miles, as you mentioned. And I think getting Pikes here yesterday was big for that room, just from a number standpoint, defensive tackle wise, because I think you like what you've heard about Gabriel Brown-Ludindy. Nick Barrett's becoming a leader in that room. Monkel Goodwin, is a guy that I think they really like. But adding Pikes into that defensive tackle room was probably the biggest key to the offseason, really to add any defensive tackle. But Pikes ended up being a big pickup that's going to allow them to have more depth in the interior.
Yeah, Pikes basically allows you to go 6 deep without having to rely on freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
And Rondarius Porter, I'm telling everybody out there, I'm just going to say this,
will be missed.
Probably the most significant portal loss.
Yeah.
Because of the room he walked out. I mean, Wendell Gregory was in the pole position for that initially, but yeah, I mean, Porter was going to eat 10 to 12 snaps a game this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he played a little bit last year with those interior guys. I mean, when he came in, he made some plays too.
So. Held his own. I think he's a good player. I think he'll start at App State. Yeah. So, speaking of D tackle, are you concerned?
Pikes was big because that was the concern I had was depth, just because we've seen how much they roll through those guys. But I think it's going to be one of those where you just want to see it in the first game where they are, because you can hear everything that is being said about them, but you want to see those guys, what they do to produce. And, a lot of these guys are going to have to take big steps. I think you need Zavon Hardy to take a big step in the summer. I think he continued to improve little by little in spring, but they want him to continue to take a big step in summer, because he could be a guy that, I mean, he could even, if he gets to where he needs to be, could be a starter at that point, because we know what he can do from junior college. But, I like what he's able to do. Then Gabriel Brown-Ludindy's a guy that I think maybe, just got, when he was at Texas A&M, obviously he battled that injury early on, but then Texas A&M always has really good interior defensive line guys. But I think he could be a guy that surprises a little bit. And Nick Barrett, a guy who's been under Travian Robinson working, a little while. But I think now you just want to see them go out there and produce. And, I think that room's going to be one that you wonder just, what they can do for the season, but it's going to be one of those rooms where you're going to have to see what they can do for Virginia Tech first game. But, I do feel from where they were beginning of spring practice to now, I think you have to feel better about that room from a depth standpoint, but then from a production standpoint, I think they continue to get better.
Yeah. I'm sort of with you there. Kreger asking the National Sports Chat Box, when does Zavon Hardy get here? He's already there. The issue with Zavon right now is coming from junior college and not, I mean, there's the difference now between portal and JUCO. Is portal guys come from places where they have resources, weight room, equipment, strength coaches, some nutrition, all that good stuff. And so physically they're a little behind. He probably didn't eat all that well out there. I mean, the game is so different than maybe it used to be at the college level, where there's a lot of science that goes into like building these guys' bodies and stuff, and technology, and some schools just don't have that. And so that's where Zavon is. I'm right now on my projected, he was kind of fourth. I'm putting Pikes there. Hardy to me is a guy that I think will get better as things go along. And if he makes a big jump strength-wise this summer, I mean, he can definitely get in the mix. I mean, he's talented. But there's just like with a lot of JUCOs, there's an adjustment period. Some never work out. Some are busts. But some, like Javon Kinlaw, didn't start his first year. He was behind Taylor Stallworth, and Ulrich Jones was on that team. They had another D tackle in there. But he played more and more and more. And then by the next 2 years, he was pretty beastly. Javon was.
Yeah.
So, and he is a JUCO guy. So, you got to just kind of wait and see. But with Hardy, yeah, I think that it's just it's a different thing than a guy that showed up that just isn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're like,
Right.
oh, we missed on this one,
Mhm.
and that is the deal there. But he just needs to keep working very, very hard. I think offensive line's interesting because, I know they're looking for more players. It's kind of funny because all the signs with the offensive line, people kind of overreact to it a little bit, to be honest. But I understand why, because you're like, well, the offensive line. I don't think anybody on earth would say that they lived up to expectations last year. I thought that they could have been a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, they had some good moments. Certainly, were better than the dumpster fire the year before. Still, I expected more, out of those guys. And I don't expect miracles. I expect, consistent play, toughness, things like run blocking, where you just line up and hit the guy. I don't know what the deal was up there. But you got to, everybody's got to kind of build on last season. They lost 3 starters. They went and got 3 from the portal that last time. They may get 2 from the portal this time. And it's because of numbers, it's because, Cam Pringle's gone. They've had some injuries, all that good stuff. It's a numbers game on the O-line. We saw what happens when you don't have numbers 2 years ago. But not everybody's out there tracking that, Alex.
Yeah.
And so people see more portal O linemen. Oh my gosh. And they'll read something where the O line didn't, they didn't have, and then they watch the spring game and they don't realize that there's 3 walk-ons up there out of the 5 blocking for Lenore Sellers. Lenore doesn't have time and blah, 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 blah. I'm looking for some good news. I'm looking for just something good. Tell me something good about the offensive line. Real surface level, doesn't have to be in depth, doesn't have to blow me away. Tell me something good about the O-line so everybody out there can hear it and just have a little precious nugget of glowing light about this group.
I think if Tree Bobolade ends up playing that left guard spot beside Josiah Thompson, which could happen, like that's a pretty good left side of the offensive line right there. It's going to be a big physical group, a big duo right there on that left side. Because Tree, we saw what he could do from he was fast enough where he could get out to some of those Georgia edge rushers or whatever when he played in those games. Like if he can continue to get bigger and physical, more physical and stronger and I think what he has, like that's going to be a pretty good duo on that left side. And I think you have to what you've heard about Boaz Stanley as well at center. I think he's kind of come in and maybe kind of anchored that spot for the most part. And they got some guys like Rodney Newsom working behind him and Marquis Anderson also getting some reps at center. But, I think, you see what you can do with that offensive line. But I think the key for those guys is, you saw them last year continue to get better and better as the year went on. But when you look at South Carolina's schedule early on, I think you're going to want them to be at their best as they can be at the start of the season just because of the opportunities that are there early on in the season to kind of get the season started off quickly. And I think, having another year, a lot of those guys, especially the ones that we're talking about as potential starters, that had Trovon Ball in there, those guys have now been in the system for a few years, been working under Lonnie Teasley for a few years. So I think having that experience is something that's going to allow them to help be ready to go game one when things are going.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I just wanted to be okay. All right. Just, okay is fine with me. Just, I don't know. It's interesting, guys, because my stepson was talking to me the other day and they got a new offensive coordinator at the school and he's an offensive lineman. And he started telling me about checks and all this other stuff that they have to do. And I'm like, well, just the center, right? Nah, it's not the center. It's everybody. And I'm like, why are you doing that at a high school level? He's like, I don't know. The new guy simplified everything. I wonder, and I'm just spitballing here because this happened at South Carolina under Spurrier. There were the first offensive line coach he had was one of these great on the chalkboard guys, and it didn't translate. Let's just say that it was a lot of, and it was intricate and you know, a little complicated for offensive line, and they looked like butt. And then you replaced it with Eric Wolford and Sean Elliott, and they got better. You know, the talent got better too, obviously. So I don't know that, you know, just, and I don't know this, but it seems like, based on what I've read and been told about last year, is that Mike Shula is making some changes to kind of simplify things assignment wise. Because here's the bottom line: there are many assignments defensive line wise, right? It's you kind of defense just goes right. They have assignments and all that, but they're not up there checking and trying to, you know, outsmart you. I wonder if, because it's all trickled down to the high school level, Alex, that there's not maybe something going on with below pro football where maybe they've gotten some bright ideas from pro football. I know the last guy before Dowell was. But you know, maybe some bright ideas about being a little bit too complex up front.
Yeah, you know, I think when you really any college position and any college football, but I think you want it, the simpler the better, especially up front for those guys. Because I mean, defensive line these days are doing so many different twists and so many different kind of games to get past the offensive line. But I think it's just the simpler the better. And you know, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Having experienced, you know, older offensive linemen is going to help with that. But I think just if they can just, you know, find a way, and I'm not saying that it wasn't simplified last year, but just continue to find ways to make it simple for those guys to, when you see this guy coming, you get him, or just when you have an offensive lineman out there thinking, that's when you're going to have guys who are running free at Lenora Sotos or whoever's playing quarterback. So just the simpler is better for not only offensive linemen, but any position in college football, just because of, you know, it's not professional football. These guys are not, you know, also have to do school and all that. Like, just the simpler, the better.
I don't play school. I don't come here to play school. I didn't
Come
come
here
here to
to
play
play
school. No, look.
Do you think tight end utilization can kind of simplify things on the offensive line, depending on what the offensive scheme is? I mean, you know, we were talking about, you know, Mo Brown and his usage in the bowl game and things like that. I wonder if you could read anything into those comments and project that into an increased use at tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely see Mo Brown in a role like that, where he's coming in and helping blocking these edge defenders in the SEC that you're going to see. But at the same time, though, you can't, you know, you can't make it too obvious what's going on if you bring him in, and because then teams may key in on like being a pass and play. But you know, I think all those tight ends, I think you could throw Mo Brown in there. Brady Hunt was a really good blocker last year. And I think now the next step for him is being, you know, more effective in the pass game, which I think he can be. But you know, that obviously helps. Bringing an extra tight end down is going to help, and then you can kind of maybe like flare them out late on a pass when the lower so is just scrambling. That could work perfectly to have those guys kind of late flare out and see what they can do. But yeah, I'd be interested to see if they maybe utilize the tight end a little bit more in the blocking game.
If Maurice Brown plays a lot of the lead blocker fullback, we're gonna have Cornbread Cowboy on. Phil, we have to
singing the praises of Mo Brown. Right?
Bring back the fullback, man. That's his mantra. Thanks to the Queen of the Cox for reminding me of that. Wayne has a question in a sports chat box. Why was Pringle not in the two deep? Was he not good? I don't know. It's fair to say he was not good. He just wasn't ready to go be in the two deep here. It's only his second year. He was a true freshman last year.
He was one that, like, next year, I think you could see take that big step and be either in the two deep or working as a potential starter, depending on who they lose. But whenever he entered the portal, that was kind of the first thought. I was like, maybe he was just 1 year away, just because they have so many older guys in that room with the depth they built.
Yeah, it's funny. Syracuse stocking up on offensive linemen. They got Cam Pringle, and they got Zach Rice, who was a 5-star like kid from Virginia, North Carolina signed. And Rice was supposed to be this all-world tackle, and then ended up sliding inside for them. So that's two gigantic guys out of high school that signed with North and South Carolina that were highly touted and had a lot of offers that Syracuse is now going to be running out there. So I wish them the best. I like Syracuse. I like Fran Brown. I appreciate people that tell it like it is these days. So that's interesting. All right, Alex. It looks like that's it. We ran out of time. They sent out a press release from the university about the basketball transfer portal class. So
let you get back to work.
I guess that's it. I mean, there's 6 guys. I guess that's it. Maybe they're not going for another one. I wonder if they're just going to roll with 14. But we'll see what happens. But certainly appreciate all your work. You're going to watch the Kentucky Derby this weekend? You fired up about that?
See, I've never gotten into it, but I do. I want to maybe see a little bit of it this weekend.
You don't seem like a Derby guy. I'm not either.
I don't know. I've watched like maybe a little bit of it in my life, but I haven't.
When I was your age, I wasn't into it. As I've gotten older, the wife and I'll go. They have these Kentucky Derby parties that are a lot of fun. She gets to wear a hat.
Wear your fancy hat, right?
Yeah, the girls love the hat.
Seersucker.
Dress up like the ice cream man, like some of the frat guys do at Carolina now.
Yeah.
Seriously, my ex-brother-in-law was in a fraternity, and it went peak like seersucker. And one day I go to a football game. This dude is literally dressed like a 1909 ice cream man. He's got the hat, the suspenders, the bow tie, the seersucker. I mean, it was mad respect. I had mad respect for it.
Soda jerk.
Yeah, I was like, I would have never dressed. I just don't. That's just not my style, Although it kind of be funny anyway. That's So that's this weekend, and certainly looking forward to that. Alex, thanks for coming on. It was a little extended, but we love the smorgasbord on the show. It's always a great conversation.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Always enjoyed. I'm gonna try to hit the right button this time. Leaving the show.
No.
Don't end the show.
I got you.
Phil's got you. All right, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Be careful. The great Alex Jones, the Low Country, the what is it?
Pride
of Hampton County.
Pride of Hampton